All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. It's Anti-War Radio. And our first guest on the show today is Jon Basil Utley. He is associate publisher of the American Conservative magazine. He was a foreign correspondent in South America for the Journal of Commerce and Knight Ridder newspapers. I think he was on Voice of America for a long time, too, right? Former associate editor of the Times of the Americas. He's a writer and advisor for antiwar.com and edits the blog The Military Industrial Congressional Complex. That's at iraqwar.org, and then I think also againstbombing.org, Americans Against World Empire, and that kind of stuff. The latest one is Polling the Right Questions on Defense. Voters Get It Right. Welcome back to the show, John. How are you?
Well, thank you, Scott. Fine. Glad to be back.
Good. It's been way too long since we've talked. Wow, what an optimistic title to read at antiwar.com. Voters getting something right and talking about foreign policy. Really, do tell.
Well, democracy does work. It just takes time. And most people, I used to be a salesman long ago, and what I learned from that was that most people are intelligent, but they're not informed. Most people are ignorant on they can't know everything. But most people are pretty smart when they have the facts before them. And that's why I think polling, what's interesting in this article is you wonder how come the other polls don't ask these kind of questions.
Right. Well, and it's all in the question, isn't it? It all comes down to the premise of the question most of the time.
And, Ron Paul, there's another article I wrote, the militarism budget, and Ron Paul had said we shouldn't call it defense budget, it should be called militarism. And I suggested we should hyphenate it to defense militarism budget. And it's all in the name. Half the budget, he figured, was for aggression overseas, etc. Was half went to defense. As a rule of thumb, you could say that.
Mm-hmm. All right, now, so you're talking about this brand new book by Scott Rasmussen,
yes.
The Holster. It's called The People's Money. What the American people think about how the government's spending our money, I guess.
Well, there you go. The people. They don't have much say. The big thing one gets from the book is how different the establishment is in Washington from what most Americans want. That it's really become very separate. Mm-hmm. And many issues that people in the polling indicate that don't show in the, for example, the news. The Daily News, one of the poll results, 82% of Americans believe the economic threat is greater than the military threat to America, namely what we're doing to ourselves. It was always bin Laden's success was causing us to do all these stupid things ourselves, and the damage we've done to ourselves. So that doesn't reflect Washington or most of the news, and things like that. It just. Another of his points, for example, is the United States is committed to defend 56 nations. If there's any border dispute or whatever it is, we have signed with NATO and other contracts, other treaties, to defend 56 nations. But in his polling, there was only 4 nations that got over 60% support from America. That was Canada, England, Australia, and Israel. Are the ones that we would fight for, go to war for. And then there's the NATO, there's some others that are barely over 50%. South Korea is 59%, but that's only a few. In total, there's 12 countries, but we are committed to defend 56 countries. Mm-hmm. And, the madness of the money. You mentioned we run a website called Military Industrial Congress Complex. And that's what Eisenhower originally called it, but It was too long. The Congress Complex, it comes up on Google then. And the point about the money, it's just unbelievable the way this country throws it away. Each soldier in Afghanistan is costing $1 million when you add everything. His replacement, his retirement, his education, his hospitalization if they're wounded, God knows. And so on. It's just, you can't believe all this.
Right. Well, now, it's interesting, I wonder, when you talk about the disparity, I haven't read this book by Scott Rasmussen, but I remember the Pew poll from 2009 where they, I think they quit asking these questions after the results they got in 2009, where the American people were, by, I think, a super majority convinced that we ought to just let other nations in the world go their own way and worry about taking care of ourselves, which, of course, the Pew Trust termed isolationism in the worst kind of scare quotes. But in that same survey, they also surveyed the membership of the Council on Foreign Relations, which is about 3,500 or 4,000 of the most influential people in America. And they all said that empire's wonderful, and the disparity in the numbers on every single answer was just incredible. It was, by tens and tens of points.
Yeah, the point for what Rasmussen in his book calls the political class is that it's fun running around the world and deciding this and sending troops and ships over here and there and imagining one's running the world is a great stimulus. It's exciting. But I would argue the main point is that America is incapable of running the world. There could be an argument, if we were capable, that most of the world wants to have the prosperity we have. They want freedom. If it was possible that we could spread our way by military force, what we try to do, and then occupying these countries, we know now that it's totally impossible. If you know Iraq, and I mean your listeners do, but Iraq and Afghanistan, the mistakes we made, the idiocies, the stupidities going into Iraq and firing all the civil servants, the whole government staff, every civil servant, every teacher was fired. Of course, all the military was dismissed, all the police dismissed, and then we wonder why the country's in chaos. In Afghanistan, you see, we'll go in there. How do we occupy and succeed when we can't trust the police and army we train? They hate us so much that their great thing is to shoot just a couple of Americans. The soldiers and police do it to us. So how can we go in and manage these countries if we're afraid of their own police and army killing Americans? It's just impossible. And another factor I might add in these countries, especially Afghanistan, every Afghan who works with Americans is told by the Taliban, when the Americans leave, you're going to be killed. And so most people are afraid to work with us, or they're double agent, with the Taliban. It's just so impossible, the whole thing, that we shouldn't go in the first place. That's the answer, and that's what these polling results say. Another interesting statistic here was that I think it's only 15 or 20% believe that Americans' troops should be stationed overseas even, or should go overseas, except for vital American national interests, etc. You talk about these things often.
Well, I guess I just am never under the impression that so many people agree with me. I guess, one thing is, I kind of think, John, that they agree with us, but they mostly don't care that much about it is the problem, right?
Well, I wouldn't quite say that. The system is so rigged that they give up. They do care. They agree with us. They do care. But after they vote, as the author also says, always they vote for people to cut taxes and cut regulations often. But it always is a wasted vote. Right. So after they do this with both parties, I might add, after they do this a few times, they find even when they vote, the guys they vote for then betray them once they get to Washington. You have to appreciate here the tremendous pressures to go with the establishment, media, and all that, and the money, especially for war, of course, the military-industrial complex.
All right, we got to hold it right there. It's Jon Basil Utley, original.antiwar.com/Utley. We're talking about polling the right questions on defense. Voters get it right, a review of Scott Rasmussen's new book. And we'll be right back with John after this. All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. It's Anti-War Radio. We're talking with our old friend Jon Basil Utley, associate publisher of the American Conservative magazine, in a piece that originally ran at the American Conservative. I think it's theamericanconservative.com. or maybe it's just AmericanConservative.com. Anyway, it's now running at antiwar.com, original.antiwar.com/Utley. Polling the right questions on defense, voters get it right. And this really is impressive, especially, John, when you go through the list of how many different things Americans are actually pretty good on, it seems like. If only there was some form of mechanism in our society where people's opinion actually became the policy of the government.
And that's exactly the point. Politicians always try to get away from the votes. First, they don't want votes where it's up or down, where it shows. They have lots of procedures, and a guy can vote for it or against it, as one of you sometimes hear. The guy who ran for president and lost. Let me give some other statistics, because it really is a key point what you said. It does. The system is rigged. I would say the big thing is gerrymandering, where these congressmen get reelected all the time. 90 and 95% get reelected because they got so much advantage with money and power, and they get rebates. One of the things in the military-industrial complex is a lot of that money then flows to congressmen as so-called campaign contributions. And who knows? I used to say, when they build a bridge to nowhere in Alaska, everybody knows there's nothing there, the bridge, etc. If they build a missile to nowhere, who knows? Should it cost $1 million or $10 million or 50? Does it work? Does it hit its target? Does it always hit? Is it dependable? Nobody knows. So the great thing about defense spending, no one dares to question it because it's defending our country, and nobody knows if these things really work. And anyway,
and also I think too, when you get to numbers as big as trillions, it goes right back to what you were saying before about people know that they don't have influence over how trillions are spent, so they just don't really bother. And really, numbers like that are so big that they're impossible to imagine. They say, what, 1 million seconds is a week and a half, a trillion seconds is 30,000 years or something.
Nobody. I've argued, instead of calling it a billion, we should all, among ourselves, publicly say 1,000 million.
Right.
Because people can more or less comprehend $1,000 million. It's a lot of money.
And 1,000 billion is a trillion.
A billion nowadays, they talk about it all the time. It's no big deal. So let me give a few of the other statistics in Rasmussen's book that I think are most interesting. 69% want competition in health care. 78% of Americans want competition in insurance companies. That's illegal. It's not allowed. Most companies just offer the same as another. You can't choose. A young person might want to choose an accident policy. Is the great risk for young, as opposed to disease, etc. 68% of Americans prefer a government with fewer services and lower taxes. 79% of mainstream American voters that is, think Americans are overtaxed. And what we said earlier, he says, the author, the majority always vote for candidates promising to lower, not raise taxes. They are almost always betrayed by the political class of both parties. So you get some idea. And I might add also that the author says there, a leader, what's missing is some leadership. His point is that the American people are way ahead of the political leadership. He even draws the analogy in the Revolutionary War. The Battle of Concord and Lexington happened 18 months before the Declaration of Independence. The Americans were willing to fight the British for freedom, and it came much later when the political class, got behind it. And he argues that there will be, perhaps in the next 4 years, someone will come along and get these issues and make a campaign on it. As we once had Reagan, when things looked so bad. Those of us who go back to the communist times, before Reagan came, it really looked like the communists were winning. And then he came and it all turned around. So it's not lost yet.
Yeah, it's too bad Ron Paul isn't 56 right now.
Yeah.
We just keep running him every 4 years until he collapses.
Maybe next year his son is. Ron Paul's not really a politician. He's more a teacher, and tries to explain his points. He doesn't care to win. But someone's going to come, which his son is very, very capable, I might add. In 4 years, it's so America. this country is so fantastic, and we have this system, and as you said, most people, it doesn't affect their immediate lives. Well, I guess it does more and more, like healthcare. But the system works. It just takes time. I mean, like the last time, we did put out a lot of congressmen. There's a group now somewhere to vote against all incumbent congressmen, try to get them out.
Mm-hmm.
Just anyone who's been in Washington too long becomes corrupted by the system. Let me give an analogy. The war with Kosovo, Serbia, you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
The Republicans weren't so supportive because of it was a Democratic war.
Right, some of them even sued over the War Powers Act.
Yeah, but what was very interesting is the freshmen and sophomore, the new Republicans, voted nearly all of them against starting another war. But the Republicans who've been in over 4 years, that is, the establishment Republicans, most of them voted in favor of the war.
Mm-hmm.
There's no better statistic that sort of shows how Washington corrupts that, basically.
Well, I have to admit, and maybe it's something to brag about, part of the formation, my understanding, the most detailed understanding of how Washington, D.C. works to me is that old Eddie Murphy movie where he's the con artist who gets himself elected to the House by name recognition alone because the candidate dies and he has a name sort of like him. Yeah. And he gets there and he finds out that every single congressman is just a con artist. And it's all about you get these industries to bribe you to do horrible things to people and steal money and give it to them. And the more evil you are, the more money you get and the better chance of being reelected next time. And I saw that when I was like, I don't know, 15 or something. I thought, oh yeah, perfect, exactly. And you don't have to have a more sophisticated understanding than an Eddie Murphy movie, really. That's the game. I mean, Fred Thompson's even in the damn thing.
Yeah, I mean, it is still a movie. It's not quite. That's really not quite fair, or not fair to many of the new congressmen who came in. Well, the way I said it was after they stay here a while, they get corrupted.
Right.
But a lot of people come very dedicated, the newer ones, trying to change things, and some. Stay, I say, Senator Coburn, Senator DeMint. I mean, there's some who really, and of course Ron Paul, who maintain their integrity all these years. But I'm just saying the pressures in Washington are so strong to corrupt them, etc. But they're not all bad when they come. There are a lot of very dedicated and good people.
Yeah, and really you're right. I mean, that's actually the story, and I kind of paraphrase it too quickly there, where that's what it is he learns very quickly. This is how it works. This is how you get on the Ways and Means Committee and whatever. Mm-hmm. And it is sort of like that, the corruption of the process overtaking the man, and here he starts out the con artist and becomes straight by the end, of course, because it's a movie. But
yeah, I mean, but when things get bad enough, which this financial situation, how we go on with these deficits, eventually there'll be a tremendous conflict here. However, if you look at Europe, what's interesting to see is that those countries would rather go bankrupt than change their ways, and understanding why Greece and Italy and Spain have these problems. Spain, for example, no worker can be laid off or dismissed after he's worked for whatever it is, 6 months or a year or 3 months in some cases. Well, nobody will hire people unless they're able to let them go if business turns down. It's the most common sense. No entrepreneur, especially the people who create jobs, are not going to hire anybody if they know that once they've hired that person, they can never lay them off or dismiss them. And that's those laws. Spain is doing a tremendous crunch on its whole economy, but they won't change the labor laws. Mm-hmm. And Greece had a typical thing in Greece, I remember. It cost $50,000 to start a trucking company with 1 or 2 trucks. Well, the purpose of that is to keep competition out. Every little industry has its little monopoly, and pharmacies have it in Portugal, and the list is endless, where they want to keep competition out. So you don't have the big stores, which, of course, here bring down prices in a big way. Walmart has medicines for $4. Well, that affected. That's someone new coming in the business, cut the prices of these generic medicines tremendously. Unless you allow competition, it doesn't happen. The Europeans have very little competition in their societies. Now, the lesson for us is when the crunch comes, what's going to happen here? What are they going to cut?
Right. Well, I saw Peter Schiff. I was just mentioning on the show how he's always so full of great metaphors. He talked about, oh yeah, there's going to be terrible cuts in austerity. That means the people who've been riding in the wagon are going to have to get out and help push for a change instead of just getting pulled along on everybody else's back.
I wouldn't be so sure of that. They may just figure a new way to get the other people. They may feed less to the people who are pushing the wagon. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And still make them go on pushing it. So it's not sure it works that way.
Yeah, it'd be nice, I guess.
I've seen it. I lived 15 years in the third world. I've seen it in these countries down there. And what they do, well, take Greece. They started taxing the lowest income people on the unskilled labor with the minimum wage in Greece. Now are paying an income tax they didn't pay before. So they put it. It's not the class. The ruling class in America, of course, is government employees. Anyway, when I visited a country, I always would follow the money, see who pays the taxes, who gets the benefits. Well, in America, everyone who's working for the government has a pension to look forward to that's worth $1 million, something like that. If you add it all up, we have a whole system here that's become, I think now the number 1 out of 7 people work for the government in some way. And you have to include the military, and not the soldiers. One of the points in Scott Rasmussen's book, there's 800,000 civilians in the military security complex, what we call it, not just the army. That's in the marshals, all the security thing. Incredible money and waste in the intelligence community. The Washington Post had a series that they reported there were 50,000 reports every year between the CIA and all these bundles of intelligence agencies now. 50,000. Of course, most were never read. They're just put in a file. It's one agency protecting the turf against another. Well, when we talk about cutting waste in the defense, we don't mean that to cut the combat infantry guys. We mean the whole structure. There's more... In cutting waste, you get to this. There's more generals, 4-star and 5-star, whatever they are, than there were at the end of World War II, with 3 times or 6 times the number of soldiers. Our weapon purchases, they have a system where they start producing weapons before they've been tested. The purpose of that is to get a constituency in every congressional district to promote the weapon, whether or not it works. The F-22 fighter plane was in 44 states were producing some kind of input for the F-22, which all makes it very expensive. The input to a fighter plane is not designed to make it the least expensive or most competent. It's to get political support by having inputs from every state. Mm-hmm. You follow. So they start producing the F-35 fighter plane. They're sitting on runways because they don't have them. They haven't yet tested all the electronics and all the stuff that goes into it. I mean, the list is endless.
Well, they had to break one test pilot out of the cockpit with a crowbar.
Well,
them damn things don't even work at all.
Yeah, there's a lot about if you look for waste, and now on the internet you can find these things, but the whole system is designed to self-perpetuate, and the money, for example, there was Secretary England is the name, who was a Assistant Secretary of Defense or something in the Reagan time or Bush times, and he had a number of 500,000 civilians in the Defense Department. But he pointed out none of them had been cut when we had the peace dividend after the collapse of communism. None of the civilians were cut from the military support groups, all this. So it goes on, and it's all covered up. The media doesn't ask the right questions. So many people are part of it. Of course, the media has to think if they started asking tough questions, then these government officials wouldn't come on their shows. So you've got to allow for that. It's their survival too.
Well, you talk about in the article the $1 trillion a year that the national security budget, as they call it, is now. All combined.
Yeah.
Up to $8 trillion, over the last decade or so, according to Chris Hellman at the National Priorities Project. Sounds about right. And, you mentioned medicines there and the economy of scale, why medicine can be cheaper if you let it be sold at a huge discount and competition, all that kind of thing. But it also made me think about all the guys at DARPA who could be in medical research or in some other free market, or not that medical research is free market in this country or anything, but they could be applying science and their brilliant engineering and imagination, mathematical skills into things that help people instead of just helping pilots fly faster to kill more people faster.
You might add people in the military. They're very skilled. The U.S. military has some of the best training and dedicated people, at least when they're young, when they start.
It's like Bill Hicks said, yeah, we can shoot a missile down a chimney, and that's pretty impressive, but couldn't we conceivably use that same technology to shoot food at hungry people?
Well, if those people were doing productive work, you have to understand military stuff is totally unproductive. They build this giant truck, the MRAP, have you heard of Afghanistan? They don't know how to get them out of the country when we leave. They're so big and heavy. And they produced, I think I saw the figure was 35,000 of these giant things for carrying soldiers over minefields. Okay, they need certainly a few thousand. But now the waste, all that could go into civilian goods. Everyone could have a new car. I mean, if you think all the production into the military and the skilled people, the very qualified people spending all their time on trying to figure which tribe in Afghanistan hates us the most,
yeah,
etc.
It's that lost opportunity cost, the seen and the unseen, where we don't usually stop to imagine how it could be. But actually, we've all seen the Jetsons, and we all kind of have an idea that we should have flying cars by now. Isn't it past the year 2000 now? We should all have flying cars. Where did all that wealth go?
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, well, we're way over here, but thank you so much for coming on the show again, John.
Scott, thanks for doing the show, and you ask the right questions always, too.
Well, thanks.
Great.
Good to talk to you. See you soon. Everybody, that's the great Jon Basil Utley, theamericanconservative.com and original.antiwar.com/Utley.